Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new book review today, and today I'm going to share some life lessons out of a book that I have finished called Medea and Other Plays by Euripides. Now, before I jump into talking about this book, I also want to say that if you find any of these videos on this channel thoughtful, provoking, also helpful for you, please consider donating. It helps me out a lot, or even obviously subscribing or following on the channel if you so want to. You don't have to. This book was very interesting. The very first thing I'm going to say was my life lesson was, number one, as someone of a Greek speaking background, yes, I speak fluent Greek, I have not read any ancient Greek plays. Okay, I should actually banish myself and go into self-exile for saying that, but there it is out in the open. But hey, at least I overcame that now, and I'm so glad I did, because I was pleasantly surprised by these plays. I had heard of the stories of Medea. I knew about the trials of Heracles. I knew about Electra. I knew I was always interested in Greek mythology. I just hadn't read any of the plays or the tragedies, because for some reason I always thought that they would be difficult to get into, very hard to understand, and at the back of my mind I thought of them like Shakespeare's plays. I thought of them, you know, when you're at high school and you have to read Shakespeare's plays and you just go don't want to read it because of all the symbolism and the themes and how they talk and the Old English and so forth. I actually assumed it was going to be the same with the ancient Greek plays. That's not to say that I don't enjoy Shakespeare or I don't enjoy these now. I'm actually putting it out there that everything I thought about the Greek plays and tragedies, reading this one, I was wrong. The book was fantastic. The stories were great. If you have some inkling and idea of Greek mythology, you'll understand the sentiment and also the stories that are in here. But don't let that stop you. Don't let it stop you just because if you've never read any of the Greek plays, you would still understand what is going on here because of the way it is written and how it is presented as a play, with a form of structure and also with a form of a chorus who come in and actually lay the background and explain what is happening, makes it all relevant and makes us understand. How did I get into this book? You might say, well, because you're a Greek background, maybe that's why you wanted to pick up the book. Well, no, I didn't. I had the book, and I also have Sophocles' play behind me as well, but I never read it. The only curiosity for reading this book came out of reading this book, which is Anna O by Matthew Blake. Now, you might recognize this book because this is a current book, a generalist populist book that is out on the bookshelves currently. I finished reading this book, and I'm going to put it out there, I'm not going to do a review on this channel on this book, simply because it's a new book, it's current, you're going to probably have so many people out there talking about this book, so I encourage you to go and have a look at that. Medea was mentioned in this book, and so I was more interested in the concept of Medea in that book, so I thought I'm going to go just to the original text and read the book, and I'm so glad I did. Now, this book was collated by Philip Vellacott, who was a scholar in ancient Greek plays, and he pulled together 4 plays of Euripides, and as I understand it, Euripides back in the early 400s BCs was someone who just pumped out plays. He didn't want to participate in Athenian society. He was someone who was more introspection and wanted to share, I guess, the plays, and most of the plays he wrote when he was banished and also in self-exile. Wrote about 97 of them, of which 17 apparently have survived, 4 of which have been pulled into this book. The 4 plays, number 1 is Medea, which is about a story of revenge of a mother, of a wife, of killing her 2 sons. Hecabe, who also is a story about a mother's grief and anger about the death of her children. There's also Electra, and last of all, Heracles. And you probably understand the fourth one, Heracles, as, you know, the 12 tasks of Heracles, or Hercules if you want to use that term. But Iraklis is the Greek term for Heracles. So all these plays were very interesting because they gave me a snippet of life back then, even though it was pretty fantastic. Cool, if that makes sense. We see snippets of what was important to the life of the ancients, but these are tragedies, which means that the emotions such as revenge, hatred, grief, power, jealousy all come to the fore, and what happens is one of these bad emotions please strike the hero or the heroine in these stories, but they make them out to go mad. They go mad with these powerful emotions. They want revenge. They kill their children. They sacrifice. They're willing to sacrifice themselves or sacrifice their children to get some kind of revenge. So reading these is harrowing, but not to the point if you're thinking, oh, I don't want to read about, you know, people killing children or whatever. When you read them, yes, you get taken aback. And there were many times where I would just kind of take my breath in, and I would get shocked, because it basically showed to me the level of depth and the emotion of what these people had back then. And in particular, I was really interested about how women were perceived, and how if you were a female in that society, you were hard done by. If you were old, you were considered a hag. If you were young, you basically were sacrificed to the gods, or you were expected to kill your own parents if they were, I guess, had gotten power by also murdering others just because they wanted the throne. Just some very, very big concepts that I was very surprised with. But the other thing I liked about how these plays were structured was that there was this chorus, and I read somewhere that in the past the chorus were made up of women who would sing what was happening, and the chorus actually gave us the background. And sometimes the chorus were, I found, like the actors. They would ask the actors questions, the actors would then address the chorus, and we would get this image of this play in our heads. There were elements at times where it would put pictures in your head. So say, for example, the killings, even though they weren't outwardly shown or stated, they would go into another room, or they would go into a curtained part of another room, and you would hear the protagonists, the actors, yelling out, hey, I'm being murdered, or they're murdering my children. But you don't actually see it or feel it, but the chorus actually makes it come alive. So the themes of being a woman, how the plays were structured, the chorus, the sacrifices to the gods, the fact that these mere mortals, these humans, could be taken over by such strong emotions like revenge, like hatred, like guilt, was an eye-opener. So much so that it just meant that I wanted to pick this book up. Believe it or not, between this book and this book, I was picking this book up more so than I was picking this book up, which goes to show kind of like the level of depth of writing, the symbology and the themes. Or maybe it was just my preference. Let's face it, it could be that as well. So another theme of how the men would help each other in some way, and that came out in Heracles when Theseus came in and actually saw that Heracles had killed his own children and his wife. There was a bloodbath, and Heracles had a cloak over him because he was ashamed that he was overcome by madness. Well, really madness, one of the other gods had struck it in him. He killed his wife and children, and yet Theseus would give him sympathy and would help him along and take him with him at the end. So in some parts we see feeling of sympathy as well in these books, but the sympathy only happened between men and not against the women, unfortunately. The women were made out to be just stark raving lunatics. I must admit, when reading Medea, the very first thing I thought, there's hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I wouldn't be surprised if that proverb, that saying, actually came from Medea. I want to also say, if you have not read any of the Greek plays, I'll say how I got into this. Now, also, I must claim that this is my very first book, so I am no expert at it, but this is how I got into for reading this book. The very first thing I did was I checked out a very short video on YouTube, an animated video about the story of Medea. Simply, I do that. If I ever want to get into a story, number one, I will see something on YouTube which is short, sharp, gives me the highlights. So then when I do start reading the actual book, I go in understanding what is the intention, what happened, and it makes it easier to read. And then dive into this proper. You're also thinking, maybe a lot of these books have lots of references, they have footnotes and notes with numbered notes that you'd have to constantly go back and forth. Well, believe it or not, this doesn't. Yes, there are some notes at the back of the book. They are relatively minor and small. For anyone who has some Greek mythology background, you wouldn't even need these if you understand the intention and know some of the Greek mythology, but it does help if you wanted to just make a reference. But as you can see, Medea has only a page and a half of footnotes. That goes to show that you can read the play as it is and still derive enjoyment from it, rather than going back and forth and trying to understand the themes and the symbologies and so forth. I understand Medea is a high school play. I would be interested if anyone out there has done it for a school text and what they thought and what kind of themes were brought out for them. For me, my biggest life lesson is I should have read these a lot earlier, because I made the mistaken assumption that it was going to be difficult and that I needed a level of understanding and knowledge of Greek mythology. Also, I mistakenly assumed that it was going to be very heavy and dense, where I'd have to go back and forth using footnotes because I was remembering my old high school Shakespeare days. The other thing is it is written in normal English, so in that sense you can understand what is happening without having look into words or try and understand what those words meant in any old ancient Greek format. I would highly recommend this book. If you're thinking, well, rather than read the book from start to finish, which I did, I had a couple of plays which I loved and enjoyed straight up, simply because I was instantly immersed into them. So if you want to read particular plays, I would say start with Medea first. Go into a story that you probably know about, and I would hazard to guess that you probably know about Hercules and the 12 tasks that he had to do for the gods, or Heracles. Third one, Hecate, and followed by Electra. My personal favourites out of this book were Medea number 1 and Hecate second, Heracles third, and lastly Electra. I just gave you a little way of being able to start from the plays that you know and are easy to read, and from the stories that you have heard from in the past, and go from there. I hope you enjoyed my very short review of Euripides, Medea and other plays. I am now going to explore the plays of Sophocles and see if they follow pretty much the same style. If you have read this book as a school text, or if you have it in your own library, or if you want to share your thoughts about what you found in this book, please let me know. Write your comments below. They are my life lessons. Don't make the same mistake I did and make assumptions about Greek plays coming from someone who is of a Greek background. I should actually keep that quiet, because it's actually quite embarrassing the more I think about it. Righto, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Bye for now.